Welcome to The Third Side Convo with your host, Bob Phipps. Your panelists today are Jeff Nolan, Ted Johnson, Bill Russell, and Drake Pearson. And now, your host, Bob Phipps.
Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're going to do our show on media bias, which I believe actually exists on all political spectrums. This show has gotten me to recognize that. I've kind of known it for a while, which is why I'm getting all these wonderful people together, even though they have different ideological beliefs, all right? You know, believe it or not, when I was growing up, we trusted the news, and everybody listened to the same people. This was really weird. There were only 3 stations, so I guess they couldn't afford to be biased, okay? Now, tonight, is there something we can do about that? It's not the same scenario. 24-hour news channels, all of those things affect it. Now, what I find is most of the discussions that people have these days about politics are something about our horrible political candidates and something they did or said. Now, that's not quite the conversation I'm looking for. I want to talk about ideas. So can we admit to bias on our own side? And can we possibly find and learn about websites that maybe aren't so nuts? Now it certainly does take a lot more work than it did back in the day, sitting down at 6:30 every evening, where the entire family would be watching the evening news with Walter Cronkite, and he would close every segment with the statement, "And that's the way it is." Believe it or not, Joe Boy, my producer, is even starting to question whether or not the right is always correct. As he said earlier this week, am I missing something? That's what this show does. Now, Joe's an especially tough case because I want y'all to realize it's taken me over 5 years to get him to realize that he is not seeing all that he needs to make the right decisions. So let's get started. And right after the break, we're going to get back and we're going to start and talk about media bias. And that's the way it is.
Aw, Dad, my computer's slow again and I can't play my games.
Call Your Computer Solutions today, and we will scan for viruses and clean that computer up remotely and make it fast again. Our phone number is 407-826-0810.
Thanks, Dad. My computer's fast again. Now I can do my homework. Thanks for calling Your Computer Solutions at 407-826-0810. The Typia Show would like to thank Boggy Creek Airboat Adventures for being one of our sponsors. I got to go on an airboat and saw a real gator. I even got to go to the gem mine and mine for some gems. We ate a steak dinner at the restaurant and even got some gator rights. If you want to have a blast with the entire family, I suggest you go to www.bcairboats.com right now. Get your tickets today. The website again is bcairboats.com.
All right, here we are. Now let's first kind of go around and see what everybody sees as the political bias and what's the issues and possibly even what we ought to talk about tonight. So I'm going to start with Ted. Ted, give me your opening thoughts.
Well, I think there is bias, and it's all over the place. I think they have to. It's called niche marketing. You got to find the tribe that buys your product and cater to them. And MSNBC to Fox to One American News, they are looking at it. Now, here's something that many people don't realize, and Bob mentioned it earlier, that there was 3 major networks, and they came on at roughly the same time. Cronkite averaged about 30 million people a night watching his show. On big shows, he got to 45 to 50 million. Fox News, the most popular cable news network, averages 2 million in prime time. So that's, 28 million less? Yet it's so influential. So I think the impact on the cable is overemphasized. There's not as much influence throughout, only to the active listeners.
Yeah, but can we trust them? Drake, what's your thoughts on media bias to start?
I agree with Ted. Right off the bat, I agree with him. There is way too much bias on all sides, everywhere. And it's really just everybody is trying to get that money. That's really what it comes down to. And it's really obvious. That's the thing. You know what it's like? It's kind of like watching you guys ever watch wrestling, like WWE? You guys remember that?
Yeah, that's
You had
real.
the good guys, you had the bad guys.
It's real, right? That's what we're watching on TV.
Yeah, I was reading today that the problem with the bias is just when they don't admit that they have a bias. Jeff, well, yeah, because one of the channels even has what? Fair and Balanced, right, Jeff?
Yeah, which is of course
Used to.
some sort of sick joke. And I mean, of all the on cable television, there's only one of those outlets that admitted bias and lying and did $1 billion settlement. There's only one of them. And, you know, they were not adjudicated like that. They admitted it, and they
It's true.
paid the money out, $1 billion. I mean, is there anything else to discuss? Shut it down. It's like that. It's admitted.
Yeah,
One
but you're not
American
saying that the other ones aren't biased either. They just haven't paid off $1 billion settlement yet.
No, I'm saying that there's, you know, there are levels of bias. There's propaganda at the absolute apex of it, and there's, well, you know, certain of our opinion shows have a skew.
Yeah.
And you know, having a skew is not necessarily a good thing either. I'm not defending that, but there's a difference from outright lying. And you know, I think it's telling that very recently, just a few days ago, I believe it was One American News. It might have been Newsmax, but it was one of those two sort of tertiary networks. One of them had, you know, some kind of right-wing talking heads on, talking about electoral stuff, and they had a chyron on the bottom that said Newsmax acknowledges that the 2020 election was fair and final. They had it on a giant chyron on the bottom while these two people were talking. It might as well have just said, please don't sue us. Please don't sue us.
Well, that could be. They've got to take that into account now, obviously. Bill,
Yeah,
why
you
don't you
can't
finish
lie.
up our what we should talk about today, and what do you think about the bias?
Well, I think the whole concept of unbiased reporting is really a fallacy, and it really came about in a historical perspective during the golden age of television, when you only had the three networks and they were kind of forced to be balanced. But when you go back to the days of old, like back in the days when Ted first started writing, most newspapers adopted a party name, like you had the Tribune Democrat, the Tribune Republican, and the views of the papers reflected the views of the parties they were affiliated with.
Republican.
So you know, they were honest about it. I say we just embrace embrace that perspective that they come from. And the difference is, and you know, in defense of one network that calls itself fair and balanced, when you discern and you differentiate between their news reporting and their opinion reporting, they're very, very clear that their opinion reporting does come from a conservative perspective, but their news reporting is a lot more balanced, and they do include the other, oftentimes the other points of view. And I'd like to come back to the other point on that $1 billion settlement for that one, because that involves a whole nother can of worms called lawfare. But we'll talk about that a little bit later.
All right, cool. Well, all right, let's start. Ted, what should we do about this? We're recognizing the fact that there's bias out there, that it's all over the place. Well, actually, let me ask you, which sites do you see are actually the close to being balanced?
You know, it's so strange now because of the lack of newspapers, which is where you got most of your local news, and like I said, the niche marketing that the cable news people provide. So, and even the local television news does very little general interest, political or cultural news that fits to your local thing. So the problem is basically money. Now, they have to make a profit to do that. I worked for a newspaper where the publisher was not a very good newspaper person, but he was a business person. And, you know, it is a business. You got to stay in business to print. That's how my stories got in, because he was a good businessman. So I think you got to take that element out of it, the quest for profit and an overall desire by everyone to be, you know, on the up and up, or at least come across and say this, we are a pro-Democrat or pro-Republican.
Is it possible, I guess, I was asking. Drake, is it possible for there ever to be a balanced media source again?
Not a chance. Not even. Don't even think about it. No, because I don't even know if there really was. I don't know. I wasn't around in your guys' time This is a dinosaur age, right? So you guys keep saying when there were 3 networks and everything was biased. I don't recall that because I was not born yet. But I'll say this: ever since I can remember, there's always been some sort of bias on television and newspapers, and even if it wasn't about left or right, there was always some slant for like some calamity, something bad happening to get your juices going. The same thing. We see the same thing happening on social media today. TikTok, their whole business model is to show you something that might upset you so that you'll stay longer. It's the same business model exactly that, the news media still uses and has used for decades.
Drake, you're absolutely right. If you look at the newspapers in Chicago in the 1920s, there was 9 or 10 newspapers that hit the street. So they're totally competing and sometimes have contradictory headlines, all reflective of the publisher's political or cultural outlook. You're absolutely right.
I think that we have to define what we consider bias and balance, because I am firmly of the belief that not all opinions are valid. Some are stupid. Some are objectively untrue.
Hey, Jeff, let's start out with that in our next segment. But I think Joe Boy's told me that the sponsors need to go and get a commercial in there. And we'll be right back, and we're going to start out with that, Jeff, because that's a good point. Be right back.
Corona Cigar Company is your one-stop shop for all your cigar needs. Whether that's a brand new humidor, a box of those new cigars you've been waiting for, a top-of-the-line cutter or lighter, a place to enjoy the finest cigars and spirits with friends, or the only cigars grown right here in the Sunshine State, we've got you covered. Come visit one of our retail locations for the ultimate cigar experience. Visit us online at coronacigar.com.
Oak Ridge Gun Range is a family-oriented shooting range that has been in business for over 30 years. They specialize in basic firearm training and offer numerous services such as consignments, gun trades, gunsmithing, and concealed weapon classes. I even got my training for gun safety at Oak Ridge Gun Range. Great customer service, and firearm safety is what they do best. So find out more at oakridgegunrange.com.
All right. Jeff kind of set the tone for the next segment here. Jeff, go on and just briefly say what you said before, that there's something we shouldn't see, or what? What is it?
Well, I think that we've polarized to a degree to where we consider the only sort of fairness or balance or lack of bias is if everybody's opinion gets equal time and given equal gravity. And that's just ridiculous, because for us to entertain idiocy or grifting or just outright fallacy under the auspice of being fair it dumbs everybody down. I think despite us being on this panel ostensibly left or right or whatever, I bet you the 4 of us agree about way more stuff than we disagree about. And to take these things and turn them into profit generators. Drake just made the TikTok comparison a minute ago, and I thought that was really astute, because once news divisions stopped being loss leaders and started being profit centers, combine that with the advent of a 24-hour news cycle, it all became about the more we can get you pissed off, the more we can get you outraged, the more how often have you seen a headline that said, Ted eviscerates Bob Phipps. He absolutely pulverized him.
Yeah, we've got that, and we've got that on tape, Jeff. But I was reading a poll today, and it looked like a fairly balanced poll, and they talked about the fact that the country at large actually does believe they'd like to hear both sides of every issue. It's like 82% of the country at large wanted to hear both sides, but only 50% of the journalists thought that they should tell both sides. Bill, can you understand that one?
Yeah, well, and this is where we get into the issue of who makes a decision as to what gets to be heard. Every news station has a right to put their story out there.
Yeah.
The decision maker should not be somebody who's decided that your opinion is stupid and shouldn't be heard, but rather let the people who are watching and consumers of it decide. They've got.
So we should have both sides of the flat Earth debate.
Well, we're not talking flat Earth. Let's talk about something serious.
That's
but
the thing.
Point
why
is,
are we not talking about
the point is, you're talking about censorship. What you're talking about, Jeff, is censorship and silencing. And when you get into climate change, the whole climate change debate, there is room where this is not a settled science. There are many very distinguished scientists who know what the heck they're talking about, who do not buy into the whole concept of climate change. One is Professor Emeritus at MIT University on climate and weather. The other was the founder of the Weather Channel, Bob Coleman, who both eviscerated the whole concept of man-made climate change. But yet you never hear that story. And we have folks on the left claiming that to put out and challenge man-made climate change is a disinformation program, and it is not. It is a program, and it is a viewpoint that is based in science and takes into account the science of climate change when you want to do it. But yet there are many on the left. James Carville comes to mind immediately. I apologize for bringing it up.
Not a scientist, by the way.
But
no,
he's a political leader who's saying that they should be censoring and silencing those who argue against man-made climate change.
And I think most of the naturalists believe. I think your man from MIT is in the vast minority. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
but
we'll probably. Hey, Ted, we'll pull the climate change off the camera, and certainly we can go after that. I think, but what it does show, though, what I read is that the left is more likely to say that the right shouldn't hear this, and the right. Does that seem to happen, Ted? I mean, it seems like, because Jeff, you're all for that, right? That there's stupid ideas out there that shouldn't be said.
I don't think that.
But let me hear from Drake real quick. Let's get Drake into this one.
Yeah, Drake, go ahead.
Yeah. No, tag me in. Thanks.
You heard what we're saying. Now, can you make some sense out of what we said?
So I disagree with Jeff on this one. But what I'm saying is, yeah, I want to hear the other side of the flat Earth argument. That I want to hear some idiots. I want to let it air out so I can make my decision of oh, that guy's clearly an idiot. All right, cool. Next, I can go on to the next thing. I want to hear the other side of the argument.
Yeah, but Drake, you're an intelligent guy. What about the stupid person who's exposed to that?
And that brings us to another conversation entirely, which is education, which I can go for days about. But yeah, we do need to do something about the education in this country, because we can't just constantly be limiting what people can hear or not because they're too dumb to make actual good decisions for themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of a form of bias, I guess, by not letting other things be out. I guess that's probably the right's complaint sometimes.
I'm going to weigh in real quick. We all remember Rush Limbaugh and the fairness doctrine that got eliminated in 1987 allowed a guy like Rush Limbaugh to rant and rave about all the liberal faults in the world, on and on and on. He never had, by law, he did not have to have an opposing viewpoint, did not have to have guests that would counteract him. So back to Jeff's point is the fact that the reason, an argument or a discourse can lead to education. When you have a one-sided thing coming at you all the time, there's no real learning. It's just that whether or not you believe the guy or not. So there's no real education as much as understanding of one person's point of view. Okay. And it goes back to that, basically. And so all Rush Limbaugh's and Jesse Waters and Hannity and Rachel and all of them, they find their base, cater to them, and cash your checks.
Got it. Yeah,
it's a grift.
Well, Jeff, what were you gonna say?
It's a grift, and it's the oldest trick in the book, and it just so happens, and I really hope I don't upset anybody when I say this more than I should, but it's easier to grift the right wing. It just is. And you can pick their pockets a lot easier by keeping them pissed off about things that really kind of don't matter. And like cultural things that are so small and minor, you can blow them up into huge things and get checks. And that's not true for
Drake, are you going to respond to that one? You going to let him just say that without a challenge?
I don't know what to say to that, because easier to what are you measuring this metric on? Is it the amount of money? Because if it's the amount of money, then probably it's because the right has money and a lot of the left just doesn't.
Well, I would argue the exact opposite on that.
That's
So
not true.
If you look at the population for like
That's
who's
just
on left and
totally
who's
not
on right,
true.
it's mostly
That's not true,
younger
Drake.
people are on the left than rather on the right, right?
Drake, the higher amount of uneducated or not college educated voters swing heavily right, and that's where Jeff's talking about, is that they're easier to be outraged
So
by a
you say
certain.
not college educated, but does that mean uneducated? Because
No, not necessarily, but by and large, is that demographic, it's definitely more right wing.
I mean,
Well, here's
does
the problem:
anybody
is
really
that
disagree with me on that the right wing is a little easier to grift. I mean, it's for real. Any of us right now could come up with a few T-shirt slogans that are disparaging to the left wing and offensive, and we could go sell them at rallies and sell out for sure. You could do that very easily.
the left has done that for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
Now, give me an example.
When you talk about everything from bumper stickers of world peace, in this war now, endless war.
That's really offensive. That world
That's
peace.
real. Yeah, that's real.
Yeah, world peace.
Let me clutch
Well,
my pearl.
no, but it's very superficial. It's a bumper sticker level understanding of issues, of geostrategic issues, of what makes war and peace, what cause belli, et cetera, et cetera.
Hey, Bill, now that we've agreed, we're going to have to take a break, but now that we've agreed upon the fact that everybody is agreeing that the bias is everywhere, and the bias kind of happens because the money. It's the only way for them to make money. They've got to form their tribe, as Ted says. Now, before we take a break, I want you to realize Joe Boy's just got an outstanding website set up. We've got Facebook, we've got YouTube to subscribe and like, and Joe Boy just set up the thirdsideconvo.com, and it's just brilliant. All of y'all are prominent on this, and this is wonderful. So we're going to be right back with our break for our wrap-up. Be right back.
Corona Cigar Company is your one-stop shop for all your cigar needs. Whether that's a brand new humidor, a box of those new cigars you've been waiting for, a top-of-the-line cutter or lighter, a place to enjoy the finest cigars and spirits with friends, or the only cigars grown right here in the Sunshine State, we've got you covered. Come visit one of our retail locations for the ultimate cigar experience. Visit us online at coronacigar.com.
Oak Ridge Gun Range is a family-oriented shooting range that has been in business for over 30 years. They specialize in basic firearm training and offer numerous services such as consignments, gun trades, gunsmithing, and concealed weapon classes. I even got my training for gun safety at Oak Ridge Gun Range. Great customer service, and firearm safety is what they do best. So find out more at oakridgegunrange.com.
All right, now we're going to try to bring the Uber discourse method of bringing everybody together, all right? So what should we be doing? Now, I am serious about it. Joe Boyd literally said 2 days ago to me, we get together every Tuesday night to kind of think about the show, and he said, I'm not sure I'm hearing everything. I think, Ted, you're starting to make a difference one person at a time, okay? And I mean that seriously. So what I want you to do, is... Now, what we're going to be is we're going to be on an hourglass. So we're going to go around 30 seconds at a time, try to keep it to 30 seconds. I want you to throw out some ideas of what should we be doing so we all can learn better. All right? I mean, even Jeff and Ted, y'all don't know everything, do you? There you go. Exactly. And I know that Bill and Drake don't. I mean, they've already been slammed a couple of times. All right, so here we go. We're going to start with the hourglass. We're going to start with Ted. What can we do as a country?
I think everybody has to make it a part to peruse the spectrum of news that's available and get an idea what the other side is saying. I do it. I switch from Fox to One American to Rachel to CNN. I go all over, and the locals, just to get an idea of what's going on.
And it shows. It shows. Drake, what's your suggestions?
I say turn off the news. Stop watching. It's all bogus. It's all BS. But the solution is within our education system. We need to do a much better job of educating our populace so that we can actually go and look at sources ourselves, go read information, go actually see what's happening out there, and not just take our favorite talking head and whatever they say and go with that.
Perfect. Jeff?
Try not to consume any news media that is reliant upon clicks. Know how your news source is making money.
Okay, Bill?
And most important, I think, is to go beyond the news. Go to the original sources. Go look at some of the things going on. For example, when they say a certain theory has been debunked, go research that theory in depth. Don't read the news. Go read the original documents, whether they be court documents or scientific documents, and read the opinions of people who are in the know and the arguments that are actually being made in court, not what somebody tells you is being made in court or by those scientific documents.
All right, Ted, let me ask you this. So you say that you go on Fox. Is there any other, we'll say, closer to the center, intellectual type, right or left that you would recommend us we may not know about?
Well, if we talked about balance, there is I think a very well balanced news show. It's on every night. It's available to most, and that's PBS. I find it to be dramatic and fact-based and simplistic and direct.
All right. Bill, you want to respond to that one, but remember what I really want out of you is what do you look at possibly on the other side of your spectrum to get some of your news?
Well, I will peruse the headlines, at least hear what they're saying. And generally what you get is the echo chamber when you turn into the left. So that is a challenge. And that's why I go back and look at original documents, whether it be issues of debunking of issues related to the election, issues related to climate change, or other issues impacting national
Jeff,
national issues.
Jeff, do you have a favorite site that actually is fairly reasonable?
I like newspapers. I like newspapers online, and I like newspapers that I have to pay for. So, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. I live in Orlando, Florida, Orlando Sentinel, which is turned into a nightmare, but it's my local paper, so I have to read it. I'm a staunch believer in you should pay for it so that it can pay for actual journalism.
Excellent. Right. Drake, what about you? You got a suggestion?
No. I would say just go talk to people. Like, what news do I need to hear from, I don't know, the major ones, Washington Post, New York Times, or Fox, or any of these? I go talk to people, and if there's something that is really, big happening, I'll find out about it. And then I want to hear, from all sides, from actual people, not from what I've been, basically propagandized with.
Well, that's why you like the show so much, Drake. I mean, you do get to talk to reasonable people on every side, right?
I get to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Ted. But is there any literally other website we wouldn't know about? So you're saying PBS is what you like, which I agree with them. They sound so good. I mean, it's just their voices, right? They've got the voice down. I don't quite have it yet.
Well, back to Jeff's point, as opposed to clickbait online, and which you see so much stuff. Newspapers, generally speaking, vet their sources, and they get two sources just about in everything as best they can. And that used to be the way. Online, you can get people to say, this is my opinion, and I'm just going to throw it up there.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the discourse has gone. It's just to these crazy, sometimes lone wolf people in their basement making crazy statements.
Yeah, it is amazing but everybody has a voice now, and you can choose who to listen to it. Bill, anybody you listen to special, just real quickly?
Well, the one website I go to frequently is freerepublic.com, which it's a group of folks. I mean, yes, the audience tends to be right-leaning, but they post articles from all over the world, from multiple sources, from Berlin.
So there's
to
good
London
stuff on there.
US.
They even have their own name.
Absolutely.
Right, Bill? They're called Freepers.
Yeah, Freepers.
You're a Freeper. Got it. Well, no, but
Freeper,
not everything is bad on it. Like you said, it posts other things. Jeff, real quickly, you got 15 seconds. Actually, 10.
I'm a big fan of reading from other countries their take on American political news, whether and like lots of other countries.
No, that's excellent. Because one of the things, and we're going to try as the show moves on, we're going to get more and more panelists that maybe even weren't born in this country, and panelists that have a worldview, because most of the problems that we're going through in this country, guess what, guys? We are not that unique, all right? There are things that other countries are going through before us. We got to learn from them, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to continue this conversation on the Third Side Convo, and we're gonna keep talking about it. We're not gonna stop. And I thank you all for appearing today. It was an excellent show, and we will see you next week on the Third Side Convo. Check us out, Facebook, YouTube, and Joe Boy's great website. Thank you, Joe Boy.